I want to say first, culture is in crisis. I really want to make it clear that we are still cutting its staff, we're cutting programs, we're cutting hours. Most importantly, we cut benefits to our community. When there are less dance classes, there's less for youth to do after school and increased isolation for struggling teens. When there are less shows at the local theater, there's less street traffic to small businesses, less vibrant, less safe streets in our neighborhoods. When there are less jobs, there's increased unemployment in our cultural workforce and less reason for them to stay in New York City.
In a time where this city's administration and city council is the most representative of people of color, it is sad to state that our cultural organizations are none the better today. Consider this. Baseline funding to DCLA has not seen an increase since 2008. 2008.
One of the questions that you asked was about equity, and I think the CDF is not equitable. I think what is happening is that small organizations like ours, like many of the AAPI organizations and BIPOC-led and serving organizations, rely disproportionately on government funding, and they are hurt the most. When the Department of Cultural Affairs says we need more people to apply, we are small, and a lot of our organizations don't have the capacity. A lot of them haven't even applied at the state level either because it's just too rigorous and it's too hard. The hurdle is too high. So our community is not getting our share of funding. You said 1/10 of 1%. Our community, even within the Department of Cultural Affairs, the AAPI community receives less than 2% of the CDF budget. We are 18% of the city. That is 2% of 1/10 of 1%. We are 18% of the city. How is that equitable?
And I urge you to look at the inequity. Look at the difference in the ability of large institutions to raise from their boards and endowments when small and mid-sized organizations simply do not have the same access.
This city is becoming increasingly hostile to the pursuit of a life in the arts, the anchor that keeps most of our dance workers here and that keeps dance alive as an art form. They could choose to be anywhere, but they come for the chance to be a part of a legendary arts ecosystem. And now, between the inflationary costs, continued changes in funding, an affordable housing crisis, and the existing shortfalls of the social safety net, since most of our workers are independent, we said that in the pandemic that culture stays, but even culture has a breaking point.
About 65% of the New York City residents that attend our performances are senior citizens. They cannot afford the high ticket prices at the major opera houses, and many are unable to travel the long distances to Manhattan. Cuts in funding hurt small organizations like Regina Opera, who provide services for New York City's senior citizens, a continuously growing population. This important section of the population depends on us and other local groups.
We didn't just get cut by DCLA. We also, as the commissioner was saying, we get funded by many agencies. That meant we got cuts in many agencies, right? We got DYCD cuts, we got DOE cuts, we got Department of Aging cuts. So we got a lot of cuts this year. The dollars we do get are so late that many organizations are forced to close. Organizations are struggling to run programs for months and months before their funding arrives. Capital funding is so bad that organizations then dip into program money and the situation spirals. This is not sustainable.
In LA, where NYPL trustee Ethan Hawke works, the Central Library is open 60 hours a week and on Sundays. In Boston, backyard of trustees Henry Louis Gates and Robert Darden, the Central Library is open 66 hours per week and on Sundays. In Paris, libraries are open every day and on Sundays. In Seoul, home of trustee Michael Kim, the Central Library is open 78 hours per week and on Sundays. In Washington, where Senator Schumer works, the MLK Library is open 66 hours a week and on Sundays. And yet, in our own city, home to more than 100 billionaires, the most of any city on earth, libraries are closed on Sundays.
Unfortunately, we could not serve everyone this fiscal year due to the loss of Cultural Development Fund support. Since being zeroed out of the CDF, we have only been able to present performances in the districts where we receive direct council member support. So over half of the Bronx did not experience our live performances this year at all. Funding neighborhood cultural nonprofit institutions is not optional, it is essential. We employ artists and cultural workers as a part of the New York City economic ecosystem and nourish the spirits of the citizens of our city.
I have read time and again DCLA's Cultural Development Fund reform and find myself angry that decade after decade we are confronted with the same desire to reform, but a complete inability to do it. Reforms and the proposed overhauling of the DCLA agency requires funding and a true commitment to doing so. One would think that the issues are so complex that it has required decades of study. It has not.
At our events, senior citizens socialize. They make plans to meet their friends. They often go out for dinner before or after an opera or a concert, and they make new friends. Due to the budget cuts, Regina Opera, like many other organizations, cut some free programming. We are letting these people down because of the funding cuts.
At last week's education hearing, Chancellor David Banks noted that cultural organizations fill the gap for more than 300 schools that do not have a certified arts teacher, and they also ensure that our city students have access to arts instruction. We know that at least 600 arts and cultural organizations partnered with schools last year alone, the most ever on record. It should be no surprise that this spike in service coincided with an add-on in funds to the Department of Cultural Affairs and the establishment in the Support for Arts Instruction Initiative. Yet, in this interconnected ecosystem, this year we are seeing firsthand how cuts to the Department of Cultural Affairs deeply harms organizations' abilities to provide resources and partner with schools.
Earned revenue in dance is down across the country. Our workers are working upwards of 4 jobs to make ends meet. Our small organizations, the majority of which are under 500K, are taking out loans, going into debt, or closing shop altogether because they can no longer afford to make it work. The city's investment is critical to provide stability to these organizations and, moreover, give the acknowledgement that, yes, dance does matter to New York City, and that, yes, despite the hardship, I can count on my city government to be an exemplary investor in the arts.